You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This is an episode about going minimalist. It's an update on my own experience of going minimalist, and I thought I'd talk about how things have gone for me. I did do a couple of podcasts early in the summer about my plans for going minimalist. If you're interested in this topic, I talk more about it in episode 113, Freedom from Your Stuff, and 115, How to Go Paperless. But this episode is really an update on what my experience has been of implementing minimalism in my life and what I've found the practical benefits to be, what I found the downsides to be, and also how it feels, really, what the experience has been like. So what I thought I'd do is, first of all, give an update on what I've done, and then I'll tell you about what the experience has been like and some of the pros and cons. And also want to share with you a few of the things that I found that worked well and didn't work well, in case you're considering this yourself. Hopefully, you'll be able to benefit from my experience. So just in terms of going paperless, I got rid of a huge amount of paper over the summer. I scanned and shredded 4 boxes full of filing. I don't have any more paper filing anymore, except for a couple of key documents that I need to keep the original copies for. But there's really just a tiny amount of paper left. The rest is now all scanned and all digital. So all that paper's now gone. I sold 67 books on Amazon. And so I still do have quite a few books in the UK, but I have significantly reduced the number that I own. And that's on top of having got rid of a few hundred books when I moved house a couple of years ago that I sold in one lot to a bookshop. I've also got rid of other paper things in my life. Like, for example, I got all my old photographs scanned by a commercial service. So they're all digitized, and I got rid of the originals. And in terms of stuff, I did a huge amount of decluttering over the summer. I sold 51 items on eBay, so that was 51 different auctions that I did of a whole real variety of stuff, just basically anything that I wasn't using. I looked at whether or not I could sell it on eBay. And I gave away a bunch of stuff, gave away a couple of old laptops and various other bits and bobs. And I took another load of stuff to charity shops, principally things like clothes and books that weren't going to sell on Amazon. And I also threw away a huge amount. So that's what I've been up to. And in terms of the practical benefits that I've experienced for doing this, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's been a fantastic experience. So I'll tell you about the sort of practical benefits and then also how it feels. Firstly, looking at the practical benefits. One of the great things is simply getting some cash for stuff that I haven't been using. I was actually surprised at how much stuff can be worth on eBay. I got rid of a whole load of old stuff that I wasn't using at all. I mean, one example is that I had an old hat that I had bought in the Australian outback years and years ago when I was traveling around the outback. And this thing was, it's like a kind of cowboy hat. And it turned out it was worth nearly £50. I mean, who would have thought it? That had just been sitting in the top of my wardrobe for years. And many, many other things like that, that I was surprised at how much people were willing to pay for. So obviously there are people out there who may have a use for your things, even if you don't. And you can actually realize some cash from doing so, which was great. Another of the benefits is just a huge increase in the amount of space that we have in the flat. I've now just got a lot less stuff taking up space, and that feels really good too. Particularly things like paper filing. I had 4 big boxes of paper filing because I'm very into the getting things done system, and GTD includes the idea of keeping reference material, manuals and documentation for stuff that you own, and the whole idea is so having a orderly system for all that stuff, which is great, except that it does also take up a lot of space, and there's no need to keep paper copies of anything anymore, really, apart from maybe some legal documents. So I got rid of all of that, and it's all now sitting in Evernote and in digital files. And that's just been a huge relief too. Another advantage of that I've found is that it's much easier to find your files. When you have everything digitally and you can search in something like Evernote, it's just a lot easier and faster to get hold of a document than it is to go opening up paper files and pulling things out manually, when you can just hit a few keystrokes and find a digital file. And I'm now in Mexico and I have all of my digital files accessible to me here. So, that's also great. It's another benefit of it, of all of the paper being digital now. We've also found that having less stuff has just made it a lot easier for us to travel. So whereas the last winter we had to put a huge amount of stuff into storage, we've saved on that whole cost now because we just have a lot less stuff to store. And we have some lockable storage in our home. So even though we've rented our home out, we've been able to keep our personal possessions locked away without having to pay for additional storage, which is great. And I think another benefit that I've found is just a lot less maintenance. I had all of this sports equipment for stuff that I very rarely do. I had some skiing equipment and I had some climbing equipment. I very rarely do any of those things. And if I ever do want to go skiing or climbing, I will just hire the stuff. And now I don't have to look after any of that stuff. I don't have to store it. And I just don't have to worry about it. And I really, really like that benefit. Those are some of the practical benefits. In terms of how it feels, my experience of going minimalist has been overall just a huge sense of relief. The less stuff I have to take care of, having less stuff feels to me a bit like it feels when you get to inbox 0 on your email. It's just a huge sense of relief. It's just less stuff to take care of and deal with and hassle, and not having wardrobes full of boxes of junk and not having filing cabinets full of files and all this kind of stuff. It's just great. It feels so much better not having to deal with any of that. I have digital files and I know exactly how they're organized and I can get whatever I need to, and I don't have all of this physical stuff to look after. I've also found that the process of going minimalist has led me to value the stuff that I do have much more. And I think that's partly comes from the process of making decisions about what to keep and what not to keep. It makes you very conscious of what you're going to use your possessions for and what purpose they have in your life. So the things that really do have a purpose, you enjoy much more because you know what you're getting out of your possessions and you know what they're for. And so, they feel a lot more meaningful to you, I guess. The fewer possessions that you have, the more integrated those remaining possessions are in your life, I suppose. It's hard to describe. But as an example, my laptop and my phone are very important to me. They're central to my experience every day. And I really look after them and I really value them for what they enable me to do. So I think you concentrate on getting the most out of the things that you do keep when you go minimalist and really understanding why it is that you've got them. So overall, I have no regrets at all about this process, and I'm really enjoying it. And I really look forward to continuing this as part of my lifestyle from now on. In terms of the downsides that I've experienced of going minimalist, I would say the most significant one is that it is a major project. Selling a whole load of stuff and deciding what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep, that takes time. It's a significant project at first. I think once you've done it, it's much easier to maintain a minimalist lifestyle. Far easier than having loads of stuff because you have less maintenance and so forth. But initially, going minimalist does take time. And I personally found it really enjoyable because I found it rewarding to do. Every item that I sold on eBay was like a little win because it was one less thing that I needed to maintain and think about. It's just getting me closer to my goal. So I really enjoyed the process, but it does take time and it does take effort. And that, I think, is the main downside that I've experienced, the only real downside, actually. So in terms of some of the things that I've learned, in case you're interested in this, that may be helpful to you, just a few things that really make a difference. Firstly, one suggestion that I would make if you want to do this is to have a system in place for deciding what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of. And there's lots of suggestions for this out there. One of them is the 2-month rule. If you haven't used something for 2 months, then you may not need it. And you can adjust that to however short or long a period as you think fits you. But that's really helpful to have a process for deciding what it is you're trying to get rid of and what you're trying to keep. Yeah, if you want some suggestions about this, a book that I read that I found quite helpful is called It's All Too Much by Peter Walsh. The full title is It's All Too Much, Living a Richer Life with Less Stuff. The author is Peter Walsh. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, and that has lots of tips on how to approach getting rid of stuff. If you do want to go paperless, it really matters what scanner you get. I would highly recommend the Fujitsu ScanSnap range, and I'll put some links in the show notes. But if you get a top-loading scanner that is able to take multiple sheets and scan both sides at once, the whole process is so easy and fast. And I used to have a flatbed scanner, and it was just a real pain and incredibly slow. So that makes a huge difference if you want to do this. It also matters what kind of system you use to store your digital files. And I talked about that in the episode on Going Paperless, episode 115. I personally really like Evernote in combination with just storing PDF files on an encrypted drive for the more confidential stuff. But you can hear more about that in episode 115. For selling stuff, a couple of tips that I only realized very late on in the process is that if you want to sell stuff on Amazon and eBay, this is a kind of a really simple tip, but it is significantly more efficient if you use the apps on your phone, if you have a smartphone, for eBay and for Amazon. So, for example, if you want to sell a whole load of books on Amazon, it's much faster to scan the barcodes using the app and just see whether or not you're going to get any money for those books. And if you're not, then you might as well just give them to a charity shop. And that is a lot faster than typing in the titles. So I found that to be quite helpful. And on eBay, if you are setting up auctions for your stuff, it's a lot faster getting photographs directly from your phone into the eBay app than it is taking pictures and then transferring them and setting things up on your desktop. I just found that to be another much, much faster way of doing things. I got into a workflow where I would take all the pictures of all the items and save each auction as a draft, and then I would go onto my laptop to actually do all the text for the auctions because it's faster typing it in there. You can design your own workflow for doing this, but I would suggest look at the combination of how you want to use your phone and your computer to do it as most efficiently as possible. Some other things that I found useful in terms of selling stuff were to organize waves of listings. So I would post a whole load of stuff on eBay at the same time. That's good because you can take advantage of free listing days that eBay has, insertion-free weekends and stuff like that. You can just list a whole load of stuff at the same time. But the real benefit from doing it is that it means you can take stuff to the post office together. So you just minimize the number of trips back and forth that you need to do once you've sold the stuff. And I also looked at the season of when I was selling stuff. So, for example, I waited until as late in the autumn as possible before listing all the ski wear. And I think that helped. I mean, I'm guessing that people wouldn't be interested in it earlier on in the summer. So if you have a load of stuff, it might be worth planning ahead and thinking about when you're going to list it and when the best time of year would be to do so. So those are some of my experiences in Going Minimalist. As I said, I think this is a really, really liberating way to live, and I've found that it's very much in line with the whole concept of the voluntary life in terms of living as freely as possible, to live free of too much material baggage, I guess. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. If you have experiences of going minimalist yourself, then please do share them in the comments on the website or email me by all means and let me know what you think. Also, if you have a chance to leave a review on iTunes for the podcast, I would very much appreciate that. That is a big help. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.